This was everything I had wanted from a Transformers sequel. Maybe it was my lower expectations after the second film, but I loved almost everything that this had to offer. It was a bit on the longer side, which helped them fit everything in, but there were a few times when I found it to feel as long as it did. There are obviously critiques that could pertain to the entire franchise, but in my opinion, this was right up there with the original film. Not as good, but about what I expected the second film to be. It got back to everything that I enjoyed about the first one. Massive action sequences with an amazing score and high-quality visual effects. The action felt a bit scarce throughout much of the movie, but once the final battle takes place in Chicago, it was pretty much robots fighting each other for an hour straight. I also appreciated how much of a variety there was throughout the film. It was mostly robots fighting each other, yes, but there was also a good mix of other styles, like the Nest team flying into the city with wingsuits, or the soldiers all teaming up to take out the Decepticons by themselves. It never felt boring or repetitive for me, because it was always something different. Like I've said before, I don't need much from these films to be entertained, and this film fixed my main problem with the second film, a lack of music. Not only did the score sound much better here than in the last film, but I also noticed it playing in the background much more often. Maybe that was just because I liked it better here, but it definitely had an impact on my enjoyment. It was used very successfully to magnify emotions throughout the film, whether it be during the action sequences or when the Autobots were exiled. There wasn't any spectacular scene like when the Autobots arrive on Earth in the first movie, but the music here still played a big role in the movie and helped me become engrossed in the story. And the visual effects once again were astounding. There were times when I was just in awe of the work done here, including multiple times in the final battle in Chicago, as buildings are splitting in half and robots are flying everywhere. There was really only one time when I noticed it being bad, which was when Sam was hanging from a grappling hook near the end. For some reason they felt that it was necessary to show that in slow motion, which made the CGI version of the character really obvious, and it looked pretty bad. But it was only for a second or two, so I don't want to give it too much weight here. Going more into the story, we start off with some more Autobot history, and initially I was against the scope expanding. It felt like we were getting farther away from Earth and focusing more on the universe as a whole, which I think was because I assumed the majority of the film would actually end up taking place on the Moon or Cybertron. But as the film progressed, I actually really enjoyed the grand scope of the film. It worked here because we're already familiar with these characters, and we've got on some of the history in bits and pieces, so it isn't completely overwhelming or out of the blue when their planet shows up in the atmosphere. The inclusion of the space race in the story was something I didn't know coming in, and as it was developed further, I just grew to enjoy it more. It felt like the opening scene with it was a bit rushed, but it was enough to understand the premise. And then the deeper history and cover-ups are slowly peeled away as the story progresses, first with the investigation by Sam, and then the humans working with the Decepticons and the various assassinations. There were so many betrayals and unexpected twists in the movie, and maybe it was just me, but I really saw none of them coming. I can see how some of them are a bit obvious looking back on it, but I was so engrossed in the story that I really never took the time to think about it or suspect anyone. Dylan was a bit of a prick who seemed unnaturally stuck in his ways, but I understood part of the reasoning behind his actions. And because we're made to dislike him through Sam's eyes initially, as a threat to his relationship, we're not supposed to expect that he's working with the Decepticons. The Sentinel betrayal really caught me off guard, but we were never really spent enough time with him while he was still good, so that didn't hit as hard as I think it should have. Something that I was surprised with was how little Michaela's absence bothered me here. Initially I was impatient and a bit annoyed at how it was barely acknowledged, like it was something that I needed to know right off the bat. We're introduced to Sam and his new girlfriend Carly, and it feels like so much has changed, and yet there was never really any explanation for it. But as the story progressed, and we saw more of the two of them together, I kind of just forgot about all of that and didn't really care anymore. I didn't need an explanation because it just was. I also found myself caring much more about the human elements here. Maybe because it was a bigger focus in this one, rather than just the first 20 minutes or so, or because by now we've spent so much more time with these characters, or it was the way they did overlap a bit, like Sam still feeling that need to matter. He's been out of the fight, Bumblebee is off on missions, and he's stuck unable to get anything done. And then when he finally has a chance to get back into it, he's struck down by mirroring, because apparently every one of these films has to have a high-ranking official who's a prick. At this point it's just getting repetitive. I really hope the next one doesn't have the same thing. And one final thing that I noticed that I don't believe was in the other films, The robots all seemed to be running on some kind of red liquid, so that when their head was ripped off, it looked like it was gushing blood. No blood wasn't a problem in the first two, so I don't know why they changed it here. It isn't big, but it was distracting enough because of how silly it seemed. Comment down below what you think of the third Transformers movie, and what movie reviews you'd like to see in the future. Remember to like the video, and subscribe for more movie content, and follow me on my various platforms listed in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow.